Good day and welcome. My name's Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about how the EU's lies about Russian sabotage of various types of cables traversing the Baltic Sea have been exposed. It's now been confirmed that the allegation of sabotage against underwater cables on the seabed of the Baltic Sea levelled at Russia were completely without foundation. This was the conclusion reached by the courts of the West itself. Now, last week, a Finnish court ruled that there was no evidence whatsoever to support these claims, plus the fact that the Finnish authorities had no standing to prosecute those it said were responsible. So how did this situation actually occur? Well, the sequence of events began at the beginning of December last year, when Finnish security forces boarded and arrested the Eagle S tanker, which was sailing under a Cook Islands flag. Now, this ship was transporting 35,000 tons of petrol from Ust-Uga, a Russian port, to Egypt. Now, the tanker's crew was suspected of intentionally and allegedly, on the orders of the Russian intelligence service, committing sabotage by damaging the Estlink 2 energy cable that connects Estonia with Finland. Now, the Finnish president and a well-known Russophobe, Alexander Stubb, immediately made it clear that he knew, how he knew, I don't know, that could not be considered accidental and was definitely deliberate. Now, 1 month earlier, there was a similar incident, which internet cables connecting Finland with Germany and Lithuania with Sweden were damaged. Now, the crew of the bulk carrier Ypeng-3 were suspected in that case. In January, a further cable was reported damaged in the Baltic Sea, which was also attributed to the Ypeng-3. NATO also drew its own conclusions that it was Russian sabotage without actually providing any evidence. Now, before I continue, many of you watching do not subscribe, so please do hit the subscribe button and join our community. Also hit the alert bell so that you get notified when I post a new video. Plus, if you'd like to support me, you can donate using the thanks button at the bottom right hand side of the screen, or by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link below in the credits under this video. Now, the NATO alliance has since launched what it calls the Baltic Sentry project, which is designed, according to NATO head Mark Rutte, the former Dutch Prime Minister, to ensure the security of the underwater infrastructure in the Baltic Sea, obviously not Nord Streams, of course. Now, as part of this operation, the alliance has increased its presence in the Baltic, with various ships, aircraft and drones now conducting additional patrols. Now, in a move that contravenes the established international maritime law, Estonia has passed legislation authorising its navy to stop and inspect vessels traversing the Gulf of Finland and beyond Estonian territorial waters. I mean, the Estonians started the boarding of ships back in May. The situation nearly escalated into a full-time scale armed conflict, with Russian Air Force jets compelled to repel Estonian forces that were attempting to board a Gabonese flagged tanker, the Jaguar, en route to a port in the Leningrad region. Once the fighter planes turned up, the Estonian Navy then retreated back to their home port for some clean underwear and a stiff drink to get over the shock. The incident had a severe impact on the Estonians, so they've not attempted any such action again. Now, at the same time, the saga of the Eagle S tanker crew who were detained by the Finns continued. Now, the Finnish legal system sought to ascertain malicious intent behind the damage to the Estlink 2 cable. However, in their search for evidence, there was some difficulties because they couldn't find any evidence. So by early March, the Finnish authorities were compelled to lift the seizure of the Eagle S tanker. Consequently, the team's leadership, comprising of the captain, David Vadocharia, who's an ethnic Georgian, the officers, which are Robert Azarian, who's an Armenian, and Santosh Kumar Churasia, who's an Indian, were charged with causing serious damage to property and gross disruption of telecommunications rather than sabotage. Now, the Finnish prosecutor's office alleged that the ship's anchor dropped into the sea, and this was due to a failure of its fastenings, and the crew should have noticed the anchor dragging along behind the ship for such a long time. Now, the sole charge that the Finnish prosecutor's office was able to bring against the Eagle S crew related to the neglect of the vessel's technical condition and a failure to comply and promptly notify authorities of the substandard condition of the anchor device that held the chain in raised position. Now, even the official report from Helsinki, references to sabotage and Russia's hybrid influence are now notably absent, which is a departure from NATO's assertions just a few months prior to this, which had prompted this escalation in the alliance's military presence in the Baltic Sea. Now, in fact, the realization would be impossible to draw an act of Russian aggression from this incident, because as early as January the 19th, the Washington Post, citing unnamed intelligence sources, reported that the damage to the underwater cables in the Baltic Sea were most likely accidental and not some kind of sabotage. Moreover, it should be noted that accidental damage to underwater communications cables is an occurrence that's not that unusual, and so it's not actually a matter of serious surprise. Now, Captain David Vadach gave his version of events during the court case that began in late August. Now, according to him, at midday on December 25th, Christmas Day, he was informed of a drop in the ship's engine speed, plus the ship's actual speed had also decreased. Now, the engine room believed that they had a problem with their malfunctioning of its engine, and the crew were unaware of the anchor falling into the sea. Valadac decided to stop the ship to determine the cause of the problem, and shortly thereafter the Finnish security forces suddenly attacked his vessel. Now, the captain expressed strong disapproval of the actions of the Finnish authorities, understandably. I mean, they were actually in the midst of piracy and forcibly seizing his ship in international waters. He also claimed that the armed security forces could have provoked a disaster by descending from the helicopter onto the deck in combat gear. This is also a grave infringement of international maritime security. I mean, if they'd asked, we would have complied with their orders, so there was no reason for them to act so aggressively, the captain said. Now, the other crew members emphasised that Finland had no right to prosecute them because it lacks any jurisdiction. I mean, the cables that were damaged are located outside the territorial waters of Finland, which means they're not within the country's jurisdiction. Now, back in early October, the Helsinki District Court issued a ruling in this case that was widely covered by the Finnish media, who called it sensational. Well, it was a bit, I mean, the court upheld the defence's position, which was concluding that it lacked jurisdiction in this case anyway, and the case should be heard, if at all, in the courts of the seafarers' home countries or the tanker's flag state. As for the alleged crimes that were committed prior to the tanker's arrival in Finnish territorial waters, the application of Finnish criminal law cannot be based on legal provisions concerning territorial waters. Now, the court delivered that decision. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because the Finnish court also rejected the earlier claims of a serious act of vandalism leading to grave consequences. Instead, the court concluded that the cable break, in the worst case scenario, could have been to increase electricity costs and a power outage lasting several hours. That was done deliberately, but not by this ship. Now, the crew of the ship have already left Finland, and the legal proceedings for the court cases cost the Finnish state over €200,000. Now, the court has also stated that they must compensate the defendants for their legal costs and their hassle. Now, the consensus appears to be a significant setback now for Western propaganda, which for 10 months was asserting that a Russian planned act of sabotage had taken place. Now, it could be possible that the Finnish court's ruling was influenced by the decision, influenced the decision of the French authorities, who the day before finally released the Russian so-called shadow fleet tanker, the Borky, which they had detained also in neutral waters. Now, according to Natalie Ermina, who's a political analyst and professor at St. Petersburg State University, she said that the Finnish court's decision in an interview with the Vlizagad newspaper was, it's evident that the lawyers and judicial officials in Western countries frequently demonstrate reluctance to acknowledge the responsibility for such blatant infringement of international law. They try and attack, and they don't want to be remembered as those who contravene the very logic of the law. I mean, these guys are just completely crazy. The Finns, the Estonians, and now the French. And the Danes, of course, they're now saying that they want to close the Baltic. Well, and all these are unfounded accusations against Russia for the severing of underwater cables. Then basically it's all part of their propaganda. Now, obviously, they're trying to convince the Western audience that Russia is aggressive and they can then ramp up their spending. I mean, NATO countries have rapidly shifted their stance from accusing Russia of damaging underwater infrastructure and accusing it of launching now drones on their airports. I mean, in such cases, the importance of evidence is also overlooked. I mean, they don't seem to have any interest in determining the type of drones involved or their point of origin. So what we're seeing is an instinctive reaction from politicians in the West to blame Russia based on the same highly likely principle that we had from the Skripal situation in London. The current narrative regarding the threat posed by unidentified drones has come to its conclusion, and it's anticipated this new narrative will be one that is a potential attack by Russian drones. And this is just designed to the European leadership's propaganda campaign of anti-Russia. They're using this method basically to manipulate the minds of their population into thinking that Russia's a threat, so not to complain about the enormous amounts of money that they're actually spending for so-called defense against the Russian bogeyman, and if necessary, even to participate in military action. So when the general public is consistently informed that Russia's to blame for all their problems, then we'll obviously might actually believe the Russians were responsible, and rather than their own politicians are the problem. Unfortunately, they're playing a dangerous game, and I think more and more Western people are not falling for it, and I don't think many of you watching today will. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.